G'day everybody, my name is Elliot Waters and you're listening to the Dysregulated Podcast. As always, thank you for tuning in. Now, I say repeatedly, that no show, no podcast on all of the internet goes deeper than this one. There is no more vulnerable show, open, honest, genuine, and fair dinkum podcast on all the internet. And I stand by that. And I have thrown out the challenge before. If anyone can come up with a show that rivals mine for its pure honesty and detail of the most, sort of embarrassing moments at times, the most difficult of times, even the wins as well, when it comes to mental health and mental illness, I just don't think any other show can go where this one goes. And this episode, I believe, is going to be another great example of that. And I'm really excited to bring it to you all because this is a story that I wanted to tell probably for the whole duration of this podcast. How long's it been going for now? 2.5 years or something? 186 episodes, I think it is. Great content. If you're listening for the first time, I highly recommend going back and listening from the start. Anyway, enough about that, although I do recommend it. But I just don't think, this is a story that on the face of it is a bit silly in a way, a little bit silly, but this underpins, this moment, this event that I'm about to go through, this really underpins so much of my mental health journey over the years since then, and even impacts, definitely, 100%, there is no question about it, the results of that night, even though they might not seem that significant, let me tell you, they still affect me today. So there's a podcast episode coming up I'm going to do very soon, and it'll be the hardest one probably one of the hardest ones that I do, definitely, especially for the ones looking way back. So we're talking like teenage years here. This is all about when I'm 16. Now, so you guys might have heard about me talk about how in therapy and stuff, I mentioned this 16-year-old loose cannon. Well, we're about to meet the 16-year-old loose cannon. And I'm about to tell you exactly where my friend, my sub-personality was born. It was born on this particular night at this particular party. But the episode that I'm talking about that's going to be really difficult, but is so important to tell, especially for my story and for so many people I know are going through something similar, but maybe don't know what it's called and how to sort of, conceptualize it. It's a really, really significant, important episode for a few reasons. But I can't do it without telling this first story. So that's what I'm going to do right now. So we're going to go back in time to me being 16 in year 10 in high school at a school party. Well, when I say school party, a guy from school had this house party. Everyone in the year's invited. Even I was invited, which is pretty cool because that wasn't always a given. And finally, I was able to do something that I'd wanted to do for a very long time. And I kept getting told that it was a bit weird that I hadn't done this yet. And what I'm talking about is my first real kiss. Forget real kiss. It was my first kiss. This is my first kiss with a girl. And this is what set off a huge chain of reaction. And a lot of it was not particularly good moving forward. And like I said, I'm going to do an episode soon, a really difficult episode. Here's a little hint, retroactive jealousy. Anyway, that's the episode I'll be doing soon. But in order to do that, I need to tell this story because this is where it all begun in a sense. And I don't say this lightly. I'm not saying this for effect. But I do believe that in many ways, this particular night when I got my first kiss, this is when Elliot's borderline personality, I don't want to say was born because I look back further and I can see it's there. It's just humming below the surface. But this, I think, was the fuse that lit my borderline personality. So this is, on the face of it, a little, sort of a funny episode, I guess. My first kiss, that's pretty, going back in time and thinking about that sort of stuff. When you're a silly teenager and everything's all new and all that sort of stuff, it's such a great time. And I wish I knew a lot of things back then that I know now. But I can't stress this enough. This is pivotal in my journey. This is what turned on the switch for my BPD, I believe. And a lot of my other mental illnesses that maybe were already there, like the social anxiety disorder I'm thinking, and the Asperger's autism that was there too. I do believe this in time, maybe not that particular night, but moving forward from that night and things that happened after that, I do believe that all those other disorders that I was grappling with that maybe had already manifested themselves a little bit, definitely intensified and really, really, dug in, and it was like, all right, Elliot, we're with you now for the next couple of years. I'm at 34 and they're still with me. We're on now. Unfortunately, life has given you the opportunity to open yourself up to these sorts of negative, cognitions and feelings about the self and all that sort of stuff. And unfortunately, I didn't realize it at the time, but this night I really do think kicked off a chain of events that has caused a lot of trouble over the years. And, it's included hospitalizations, suicidality, self-harm. Listen to the podcast. It's all there. There's more coming. Don't worry about it. But it's interesting because when I do my Black Dog presentations, right? Okay, so for those who don't know, I go around to schools or whatever in community groups. Well, not whatever, but you know what I mean. I go around to these sorts of different groups. I'll do online webinars to parents and all this sort of stuff. And I talk about my high school issues. And this is really at the crux of my high school issues. This is one of the biggest issues that there was. And the things that led up to it and the way I was feeling about the self at the time. And then what happened proceeding afterwards. So although, and I say, when I'm at the high schools in particular, I say, this is a story about, when girls don't have cooties anymore and all, and the ones in year 11 and 12, well, year 10 as well, like I was back then, 11 and 12, they sort of get and they laugh, but the younger kids, they just believe that the opposite sex has all these, cooties and stuff. Stay away from that, boys, yuck, you know what I mean? But, on the face of it again, I'm saying it again, it appears almost comical, this sort of story that I'm going to tell. I think it's sort of funny, but I cannot state enough how important this has been for the trajectory of my mental health moving forward. This was a turning point, and you could see a lot of the current Elliot in that Elliot, but you can also see, looking back, and we'll go through this more too, I'll open you into this level of insight, but I can see a lot of where that Elliot back then is still with me today, and, we need to work on those things. But that is exactly what I'm working on in therapy, but let's get into it. This is the story of my first kiss. Now, to really, I'm going back a few years now. I'm 34. This is back when I was 16, and I'm trying to create not the context, but like emulate the context or the setting in some ways through this episode today. So what I've done, I've had a few beers. I've had 4 beers, right? 4 VBs. Back then, I was drinking whatever the hell was in the esky, but now it's low carb VB. So I've had 4 beers just to really loosen up a little bit, because this story and the retroactive jealousy story that's coming up, and a lot of these high school issue stories I'm going to bring forward, they were fueled by alcohol. So I thought it's only fair. This is the most fair income, genuine podcast on all the internet. So I've got a bit of a buzz to make sure I'm in the right headspace, okay? And I can relate to myself back then. And this sort of, in a way, it all adds to the theatre of the story, so yeah. But that's and that's how sort of serious I'm taking it. Might sound like a bit of a joke on the face of it. Again, a bit of a joke, but this episode definitely is not. But alcohol was a huge part of this story. And I feel it's only fair, if I'm going to tell this story properly, that I have a bit of alcohol, just to remind me of what it was like, you know what I mean? And really tap into those memories. And let me tell you right now, I am dialed in, baby. I am dialed in. So my first kiss was at age 16. That's the first thing that's probably interesting. So when I was at school, I don't know, people seem to be, some people you knew of that kissed people in like year 6, and they were pretty cool. It was like, hey, that's pretty, and everyone knew about it, It was like even when we all went to high school, we all come together, the different primary schools around, the Katara area here in Newcastle. When all the different public schools, we all come together to go into year 7, the first year of high school. You just knew stories about what some other people had done at their primary schools before they got to high school. And there are the few people that could lay claim to the fact that they had already kissed somebody in year 5 or year 6. And then they come to school in year 7, and then we're all lumped together, all these different kids from different backgrounds with different experiences and different schools, but also a lot that tied us, fundamentally together. But it was a big thing, so-and-so had kissed so-and-so, oh man, that's huge, man. Can you imagine doing that? That's crazy. Like even holding hands with someone was a big deal, which I was able to do in year 6. Actually, I was able to hold the hand of a girl in year 6, which was pretty cool, but didn't get the kiss, as we know. That come in year 10. But so it was a big deal. I remember thinking back then, and, I wasn't sure of my place in the world in year 7 going into high school. No one really is. We're all sort of jockeying for social positioning and all that sort of stuff. And the people who seem to have been more experienced with that sort of stuff that, to be honest, I wasn't particularly interested in, but I felt like I should have been because it seemed like a big deal to people. And little did I know that sort of idea that this, what you've done with girls or guys or whatever, in part defines how cool you are in your social standing. I had no idea how important that was going to be later on, but let me tell you, it was. And even in year 7, it sort of was too. So pressure was on, pressure was on. And I was like, all right, I don't know, so-and-so and so-and-so kissed back when they were in primary school. We had a school dance in the first term and some people kissed each other there. So, all right, they've ticked that box. They're pretty cool. They're the ones to sort of try and emulate. All right. Elliot needs a bit of this as well because, this is obviously something that's very important to everybody. And people seem to be using this as a way to define their standing, their social standing, although obviously I wasn't thinking of it quite in those psychological terms at the time, but that is essentially what I was thinking. So pressure was on. I remember even in year 6, pressure was on. It was like, all right, we need to, push along on this whole romantic sort of stage because that means you're cool and that means you're successful and it's validation. And that is so, so important to all of us, I reckon, going through, the start of high school and beyond, but especially for people who had an inclination towards personality disorders like BPD, low self-esteem, very socially anxious, but also socially aware. And that's something I haven't really said too much on the show, but it's true. As socially anxious as I was when I was younger, which was, undiagnosed at the time, autism and ADHD as well, there's a lot going on, which I look back now and it's like, yeah, it makes sense. But, I just forgot what I was going to say. See, that's the ADHD brain again. It happened today at work too. I was telling stories and I forget halfway through. Anyway, let me think. But to someone whose mental, I don't want to say mental state, but, certain mental fragilities involved, being able to kiss someone and being able to walk around knowing that you've kissed someone and knowing that everybody else knows that you've kissed somebody, that is huge. And in my world in that time, it didn't start off like this, but I'll tell you, it became the biggest, most important thing that I had going. It was defining. It was defining. And I was just waiting for the opportunity that I could tick that box and then theoretically sort of move on and do whatever the hell you do after you finally kiss someone. I don't know. Wouldn't have a clue. So, even early high school, late primary school, but definitely early high school when all of us come together from the different schools and you're hearing stories about, people from, which is terrible, but anyway, it is what happened. What things happened at other primary schools and all this. You start to compare yourself and then the pecking order, the social hierarchy starts to form and, all of a sudden you're sort of defined by where you are in this social hierarchy. And that is the biggest, most important thing in the world. Now, let me tell you, I don't know if you would pick this, I'm not sure, but I wasn't, believe it or not, you won't be able to, but I'll tell you the truth. I wasn't one of the cool kids. Can you believe it? I wasn't. Elliot Waters was not one of the cool kids. I wasn't, but I was definitely one of the nice kids. So, I was the sort of kid in high school that, everyone liked me. I wasn't necessarily the coolest. I wasn't necessarily the first person invited to a party. I wasn't even necessarily invited to all the parties, but everyone liked me, because I don't know, looking back, I was a nice kid. I was a good kid. I was a nice kid who was just trying to figure out where his place in the world was, and I could not figure it out for the life of me because, well, now we know autism, ADHD, OCD, social anxiety, whatever, they're all there, BPD, bipolar, whatever. So I was a very, everyone liked me, and I used to take, I knew that was important because, you need feedback from your external. Again, I wasn't thinking in these terms back then, but, you look for feedback from your external environment to see sort of how you're tracking in life. And if people sort of like you, that's usually a pretty good sign that whatever you're doing seems to be working. And I was just doing me. I was just being me, to begin with at least. Later on, I started putting a big act on. But like in year 7 and stuff, everyone seemed to like me straight away. I definitely was not near the top of the social hierarchy, but I was well liked enough that I was protected if anyone tried to overstep that sort of boundary and cause a bit of trouble, because I am a lover, not a fighter. I'm a lover, not a fighter who doesn't do much loving. Anyway, and the reason, so, I, even back then, if you listen to the show, I cannot stand confrontation, and I couldn't stand it back at the start of high school either. So I was very happy in the fact that people sort of looked after me a bit, even though these same people sort of ragged on me a bit and ripped me off and stuff. I wouldn't say I was like bullied massively, but as you will discover over the next few episodes and this one as well, there were some pretty cutting things said and repeatedly said that I still carry with me today. So there is definitely an element of trauma from my time in high school. And I don't want to understate that because I tend to, but I've had, mental health professionals tell me that it's legitimate and it's real and it's caused a lot of problems over the years. So I am not going to diminish all that sort of stuff. But when I was in high school, this is very long-winded. I also, so I was popular in the sense that I was seen as a nice person, sort of good to hang around because, even back then, I remember in year 7 that some of the bad kids used to come up to me and sort of ask for advice because they were, in trouble, and they'll put on a conduct book, which is where each class, I don't know, the teacher has to sign it, to say they didn't muck up and all that sort of stuff. And that's a big deal. Their parents aren't happy that little Johnny or little Timmy, is on a conduct book. That's a bad sign. How dare you? So a lot of these kids used to come up to me even back then and just sort of ask for advice and just want someone to, I don't know, just sort of evaluate the situation in a nice way and in a serious way. Even back then, I remember there's plenty of stories I'm sure I'll tell in due course of things like that happening. And that continues on today too. And there's every chance that it was those sort of early moments in high school that, set me up for this trajectory, definitely. But the part of trying to hear people's stories and offer advice where I can, I don't know, it's very interesting. I am rambling on. I'm sorry. I'm rambling on. I'll get back onto task. What was I talking about? Yes, me kissing, of course. So anyway, so we're going through school, and the moral of that really long-winded story is that the amount of people, and if you'd first off, have you kissed anybody? And then it was, how many people have you kissed? So the numbers game was really important. So anyway, year 7 goes, I haven't kissed anyone, but I wasn't too worried at this point because, I don't know, I was a late bloomer. I wasn't interested in girls at this point. I was still interested in trucks and trains and the Newcastle Knights and all that sort of stuff, AC/DC, my autistic fixations, which have never, ever left me, and they never will. Much more important than kissing. But year 8 rolls along and I start turning into a bit of a naughty boy. All of a sudden, I'm starting to put on this act. Again, this deserves its own episode, but I started noticing around me that the cool kids, the ones towards the top of the social hierarchy, seem to be the ones who were really loud and obnoxious. And I decided some point between year 8 and year 9, when all of a sudden this idea of kissing and the fact I hadn't done it was becoming a pressing issue, I decided, all right, I'm going to emulate the cool kids, still in my own Elliot, he's a nice guy sort of way, but I started being a lot louder, a lot more obnoxious. I used to get sent out of class for talking too much, but I think that's ADHD showing its true colours there. But I revelled in that because it sort of gave me a bit of an edge, Elliot's getting sent out again, and I felt a bit cooler, and maybe I'd be a bit more accepted if I did stuff that way. And even today, I still have moments. We know the 16-year-old pops up and it drives me to do certain things even today as a 34-year-old, and this is the beginnings of that sort of sub-personality of mine that is out there to protect me but needs to just back off a little bit. So, going through school, eventually more and more people seem to be kissing each other and parties are becoming more common, and I wasn't getting invited to parties yet, but I would be soon, which was good, because, again, all the cool kids went to the parties and kissed all the girls, and that's where you wanted to be. So year 8 and year 9 sort of progresses. My grades start faltering because I cannot concentrate on schoolwork. I just cannot concentrate at all, and I've never really been able to, and it's starting to get worse. I've really taken on this obnoxious, loud persona. I've really taken it to heart, and I'm starting to do a pretty good job of it. So I'm getting sent out of class all the time. I'm disruptive, but I thought, hey, the louder I am, the more the chicky babes are going to notice the big dog. You know what I mean? So going through school, and we're into year 10, I'm 16 at this point. So, I've gone through 13, 14, 15, very important years, but now we're at 16. And we know how important this is to me because, once again, the 16-year-old self pops up all the time, the loose cannon. And I keep talking about it even today. My last psychology appointment I had this week, the 16-year-old was mentioned again, although briefly, but even so, it is still a pressing matter, and this is where it all began. So 16, year 10. So a lot of people at this point supposedly had kissed people and starting to do things even more sexual than that I didn't even know existed, but Elliot was learning quickly, and I was learning that I needed to jump on the girls' train because that is what defined me, whether I was cool or not, and everything at this point, at this age, in that mindset, because I already had the low self-esteem, I already had the negative cognitions, battling the self, the roots of my borderline personality were already there and they were about to flare up. It was all there. It was like the perfect storm. My mindset, my psyche at that point, was raw, vulnerable, and it didn't need much to be tipped over the edge, and my environment gave it to me in bucket loads. So what started happening was people noticed that all of a sudden, Elliot, who's now been to like 1 or 2 parties, Elliot, what's going on? He hasn't kissed anyone yet, and, all of us boys have, even though later on I found out that they hadn't, but my impression was that everybody had, except for me. So obviously I'm starting to think, all right, everybody's kissing people except for me. They're doing more sexual stuff too. Like I'm falling behind here. What's going on? I need to catch up because I'm an effing loser. This is not good. And what I really internalized was this thought, which then really brought the BPD on, was that if people aren't kissing me, that means I'm defective. And that was the conclusion that I started to come to, which was there must be something wrong with me because everyone else is doing it except for me. So I'm the problem. In some ways, sort of yes, although I don't want to be too hard on myself because I was just a young kid. I didn't know what was going on. But in a lot of ways, no, because for starters, like I said, there was this illusion that everybody was kissing everybody at these parties, and it just actually wasn't really true. But, I didn't find that out for a very long time. So all of a sudden, people are noticing, though. This is the thing. It's not just me noticing, myself, my own circumstances. Some people that I was at school with started noticing that, oh, Elliot, you're yet to do that, aren't you? And then all of a sudden, people started prodding a little bit, Elliot, what's going on? You haven't kissed a girl. There's a party this weekend. I think I can get you an invite. Surely that's when you're going to do it. Like, come on, and I'm thinking, yeah, well, I guess so. This is very important. And like, I need to do it. So I guess this is a good opportunity. I hope I get invited. And then at this point I was getting invited, because like I said, I was popular in the sense that I was a good kid and people, genuinely liked being around me because, I don't know, I was nice to people, I guess. I don't know. And I'd like to think I still am. But at this point, that started to be a little bit more cool. And because I was being loud and obnoxious and I was really pushing my personality, my fake personality out there, it actually started to work. People were more receptive to this loud, obnoxious me, and I was standing out, not just standing outside the classroom because I got sent out because I was being disruptive, but across the year, the cohort, I stood out a bit because I was a bit different. I was autistic. Remember, I had fixations back then too that were way over the top. I'll tell you one day of how I used to sign my name. Anyway, that's another story, but it really shows how sort of different but fixated I was at this time. But people seemed to like it, I was a bit weird. I was a bit different, but I was nice and I was pretty funny, and I was loud and, everyone sort of liked that. So all of a sudden I'm getting invited to these parties. And I do look around me at these parties and there are people kissing each other. It's like, God damn it, what's going on here? When do I get to do this? Surely it's coming because I know how important this is. And I'll tell you, everyone keeps telling me how important it is as well. So this needs to happen. So all of a sudden I'm putting all this pressure on myself and I start getting obsessive over this idea that I must be, I must have something wrong and be defective in some way or else what the hell? I would have done this too. Like, what's going on? There must be something to me that makes me different from everybody else, even though everybody else wasn't doing this at that time, but I didn't know any better. So a few parties went along, and like I said, people started saying stuff. Some of the boys were like, mate, you need to start, I can't believe we even did this. Like, even back then, it's like, this is so lame. Who cares? Who cares who you're kissing and stuff? Why is it such a big deal? And as far as I remember too, this wasn't a big deal for people like it was a big deal for me. Like, there were other people in my friends group, or the big sort of group, that hadn't kissed anybody, and we all knew that too. But for some reason, and I still can't explain this, for some reason, I was the one that people wanted to point fingers at and say, hey, this is a bit weird, Elliot. What's going on? You need to be kissing people. I don't know why I was special when it come to that sort of thing, and why the finger was pointed at me and why I was made to feel like I was the defective one. Because people didn't know at that point, but at that point, my negative self-talk was huge. Like, the BPD was just starting to grow out of this, but don't get me wrong, the low self-esteem, the insecurities, all that stuff was already there, locked in, and had been for a very long time. And those obsessive negative thoughts about the self were going round and round and round. And all it did when people were pointing at me saying something's not right here, why aren't you kissing people, was strengthen those negative thoughts and add, as far as I was concerned, evidence from my external environment to say that something was seriously wrong. Something was seriously wrong with me. And I still don't get it to this day why I was the one that seemed to be the feature or the subject of this sort of, I don't want to say bullying, but I guess in a way it was. But this is the thing. The people who used to point the finger and make the biggest deal out of this are still some of my best friends and maybe listening to the show right now. Now, there is no way that I put any blame on any of my friends at the time. We were all teenagers. We didn't know what we were doing. We're just trying to jockey for position in this social hierarchy, and I guess people were using me to push me down to push themselves up, which is what happened very much so a little bit later on. And that's, I guess, what happened. And there's no hard feelings towards any individual now about what was going on in year 10. We're just kids. We didn't know any better. But it is interesting that some of my, still, people that I would call my oldest best friends were the ones that were doing this the most. And it hurt the most because they were the ones that I thought were in the corner, and it felt very isolating. It felt like the whole school was at one point, well, not one point, after a while, all the time, it just felt like everybody was pointing at me going, look at this loser. He's never going to get a girl, unbelievable. What a loser, And I started thinking that too. Yeah, I agree with you. And it just, I just do not understand to this day why I was the fixation of the years sort of, let's point at someone who's not getting with the chicks or getting with the guys, and let's like rip them off and make ourselves feel better. For some reason, I was that punching bag. So anyway, and it's hard because some of the people that were saying it the most were people that at the time were my best friends and still are. And some of you may be listening, and like I said, there's no hard feelings at all. And, I'm never going to mention names or anything because it's irrelevant now, because those people are still my, part of my best friends today because they are my best friends, and we've been through everything together. And, this is just an unfortunate event that happened, but it was significant enough that it is still affecting me today. And if I'm going to be totally open, genuine, vulnerable and honest on this show, I have to talk about these things, and there's more of this coming. So anyway, going to parties sort of, and look, I never really drank much at this point because I was a runner at this point. I was a race walker. More on that another time too, fair dinkum. But I was an athlete, but I used to train every day. I did. And I do credit my training to really pushing back a lot of the negativity in my world during these teenage years. If I wasn't exercising every day, training hard, giving it everything, because we know how important exercise is, I do wonder what could have happened. Things would have been a hell of a lot worse, that's for sure. But so I used to go to parties, right? And, again, because I was a bit different, and everyone thought it was funny, but I used to take strawberry milk to parties. And some people listening, if the people I'm thinking might be listening are listening, you guys will know straight away about the 2 cartons of strawberry milk I used to take to parties all the time. And everyone used to steal them and spike them with vodka or something else. And, and I would act oblivious and like, I can't taste any difference. Meanwhile, I'm getting absolutely hammered because my poor little body didn't know what alcohol was. And I knew that it was in there, but I was like, I'm going to ignore the fact that I know that. And I'm just going to lean on the fact that I brought strawberry milk tonight. So I'm trying to do the right thing. But this alcohol stuff is pretty sort of cool. It sort of relaxes you a little bit. That's pretty awesome. So over this time, a lot of these parties I used to go to, I used to be sober or I'd be almost sober. I wouldn't take alcoholic beverages to begin with. So that was a bit of a problem too with this whole idea of kissing somebody, because I don't care who you are, your first kiss, you're going to be nervous. And if you're not, that's a bigger, risk factor than being anxious about it. So obviously I was too. A lot of people were able to kiss each other because they were absolutely blind, drunk, wasted. Let's be honest. Let's be real here. I wasn't like that, or at least not at the first few parties, because I was the athlete who was a runner, and that was part of my identity, and everyone thought that was sort of cool in its own funny way. And Elliot brings his strawberry milk, and as soon as he gets here and puts them in the fridge, let's grab them, we're going to spike them. But it was sort of a little niche sort of thing that I did, and it was in its own way, it was sort of cool and accepted. But as far as the fundamentals of kissing a girl is concerned, the fact that I wasn't getting blind, drunk, didn't help. It didn't help. But as we'll find out shortly, being blind drunk didn't really help either. And that's still the case today. Even today, if I'm in a mood where I'm a little bit more anxious than normal, like drink, it doesn't matter how much how much alcohol I drink, that social anxiety sort of component, it's still there. I've never been able to dull it with alcohol to a level that's comfortable. And that was still a huge problem when I was 16. But a bigger problem was when I didn't even get a jump start on it at all because I was drinking strawberry milk. Anyway, parties are going. This is a long-winded story. I'm sorry, but I do need to get this out because this is very therapeutic for me. This is very cathartic. So I hope I'm not rehashing too much as I tell this story, but I am living this again in my head. I'm reminiscing right now, right here about those parties and, and all those sorts of memories. And it's quite surreal actually, because these are memories that not necessarily have super amounts of trauma associated with them anymore because I've moved on. It's what's come later that's probably been the bigger problem. But I don't go back in time to when I was 16 very often because there was a bit going on. So I sort of steer clear of that. So I'm in the zone at the moment, hence the, couple of beers. I'm feeling like I'm about to go to one of these parties again, and I really hope they don't spike my drink. Oh, geez, that would be very unfortunate. Oh, no, please don't. All right, so continuing on, more and more people are hooking up, And it's now becoming really obvious. It's like, right, Elliot, what's going on, mate? What's going on? You haven't kissed anybody. We're 16, come on. People are having sex at this point. Like, get with it, will ya? And now this is becoming a real big problem. This is a huge problem, and I'm dwelling on it every day. I'm walking to school and I'm thinking about how I haven't kissed anyone. I get to school and I'm in assembly looking around. I'm thinking about how I haven't kissed anybody. This is the OCD and the BPD starting to fire up as well. But, this was huge. And all of a sudden, those cognitions just went round and round and round. And I just ruminated constantly on the fact that it must be me that's the problem. I'm different in some way or defective. It wasn't so much different, but definitely it was defective was the sort of way I was thinking. And, this was a me problem, and holy dooly, that's bad. That's bad news, man. That's bad news. You're not cool. You're low on that social hierarchy. You must be ugly. Girls don't want you. They never will. This is so embarrassing. Holy dooly. And me at 16 at this age, that was everything to me. Everything. And because my mind and my psyche was so malleable at this point, because I already had some BPD tendencies that were just sort of starting to stir, this constant rumination, this obsessive and compulsive rumination about how I haven't kissed anybody and what that means to me being a person and how that defines me as less than everybody else and not accepted by the tribe, this was everything, and it was all consuming. I remember one party in particular, one of the girls, this is so embarrassing. One of the girls, there were rumors, right? One of the girls wanted to kiss Elliot, okay? That was the rumor. It got back to me and I was like, all right, holy hell, I don't know what to do, but okay, let's roll with it. But the way it was worded or the way it was framed was that this individual wanted to teach me how to kiss. Now, I've since learned that this individual just really wanted to kiss Elliot because he's pretty cool and he was pretty funny and nice back then. But, it was, again, we're all jockeying for position. So it was, the angle was this person of higher social status is going to teach Elliot, who we all like, but needs to get a wriggle on, teach him how to kiss. This will look good on her. And it will be good for him too, because he can tick that off the list. And I remember sitting at this party, and this was the point where I started drinking properly a bit more. And I was on the Carlton Colds back then. I still remember the Carlton Colds. They were great. Don't think you can get them anymore. But I was on the Carlton Colds, and I was it didn't take much for me to get, intoxicated. I'd have 2 beers and I was flying, and I miss those days so much. It would save me so much money nowadays. But they were the days. They were, because it was all new and fresh and it was exciting, and it was a different time then. I much preferred, being intoxicated then than I do now, for example. But I remember sitting with this girl and I knew what was going on. She's talking to me and all I've got to do is one little sort of move and she'll dive in and then I can finally get that monkey off the back. But I felt as though people were watching. Some people were definitely watching, but I don't think to the extent that I thought that they were. This is social anxiety 101. Everybody negatively judging me and me being super hyper aware of these people who are negatively judging me and feeling really bad about it. So I remember I couldn't talk properly. I didn't know what to do. I was super nervous. The anxiety was unbearable. I couldn't handle it. Everyone looking. And then I would always look at like my watch. I had a watch back then. And I'd look at the time and think, oh no, it's 10:30, mum and dad or so-and-so's parents are coming to pick us up at midnight. Oh, I've got an hour and a half to go. Come on, Elliot, you can do this. Come on. Please, God, if you're out there, please let me do this so I can move on. That's what I used to think. And I'd be sitting there talking to, for example, this particular girl, and I knew what was on the cards and I just could not do it. I could not do it. The pressure was too much and I just crumbled under the weight of expectation. And this happened a few times. There are a few, looking back now, I didn't realise a lot of them at the time, but there were opportunities. Mate, Elliot could have cleaned up, let me tell you, but unfortunately I didn't know what was going on. I was a little bit naive, but there are opportunities looking back and I was just so petrified, so frigid. There's a word that used to follow me around. Elliot's so frigid. He won't touch a girl. Elliot's frigid. Oh, man. Ugh. Shut up, everyone. But there were opportunities to sort of get the monkey off the back, but I was too petrified to do it because I knew what was on the cards. It was embarrassing. Everyone talking about, maybe at this party, Elliot will finally kiss someone, and people are sort of pointing and stuff, and they probably weren't, like I said, to the extent that I was perceiving it, but I was perceiving it, that everybody had an interest in this and was waiting for it to happen. And the weight of expectation was just too much for this poor, nice, but a little bit timid, although he's putting on this act of being loud and obnoxious and confident. But, poor me as a 16-year-old who was just trying to figure out what the hell life was all about. A little bit how I think now. So anyway, a few parties go, there's missed opportunities and the pressure's building and building and building. And we're at school and we've got this next party coming up. And everyone's going. This is at the point now where everyone's invited. So these parties are huge. Everyone's getting absolutely smashed and just macking on with each other. And, I'm getting there and I can't walk straight because I have 2 beers and I'm absolutely tanked. But I'm having a great time, but I'm still not kissing people. And the whole time I'm at these parties and the lead up to these parties and before going to school, while I'm at school, when I'm at home, get home from school, these constant ruminations just kept on going. And the pressure built and built. Anyway, we get to this particular party. So, right, it's at the point now where the impression or the understanding with everybody is that I'm literally the only person who now hasn't kissed a girl. Which again wasn't true, but I had no clue at this point. Everyone was just going along with the idea that it was just me. So, people are trying to give me pep talks and stuff. We're doing pre-drinks at a mate's place. And, so-and-so, why don't you try and hook up with so-and-so? I was like, yeah, maybe. What about, oh, yeah, I'll give it a go, boys. You got me back. She'll be right. We'll figure it out. This is it. I promise. This is it. So we're building this up. I'm drinking too much because even back then, and this is a thought I still have today, which is driven by this 16-year-old, don't you get it? This 16-year-old me back then was thinking the more I drink, the more confident supposedly I'm getting, even though I wasn't. But the idea was the less anxious I would be and the more chance I would have at hooking up with a girl. And that is still the mentality that I have a lot today, which is, I go out, drink as much as I can, and there is that very strong voice from my 16-year-old self saying, that's it, Elliot. If we have more to drink, we have better chance of picking up a girl, getting that validation and not feeling so crummy about ourselves. And that thought was born from this 16-year-old age self, and that's why I refer to the 16-year-old all the time. So we're at this, we're pre-drinking. I remember this party, I passed out before we even left. Typical Elliot, cheap drunk. I was on the goon with a cask wine, and I remember I was on vodka cruises as well. That's one hell of a chaser. And, and I'm absolutely tanked. I'm obliterated, can't walk, getting carried to the car of my friend's parent who was silly enough to drive us to this party. But I'm thinking, right, I'm pissed and this is good though. I'm ready. So we get to the party. Right, and I've got my eye on somebody. Again, even today, not that I'm going around trying to pick up every girl, but, I get sort of, I don't know if fixated is the word because that's got connotations with sort of autism, but I sort of pick out someone who I think is nice and think that's a nice person and I'll concentrate on that nice person, And it was a bit like that back then too. So I had my person that I wanted to try and kiss. I had her and the boys knew who it was. Funnily enough, it was actually the ex-girlfriend of one of my friends because, back at high school we're all sort of, interconnected in that sort of way. And that would be a big problem later on, but I didn't quite have the old retroactive jealousy at this point, so I didn't care. But what I did care about was, I reckon this chick's pretty cool. I reckon she's pretty hot. And I also think, for whatever reason, she might kiss me. I just have this feeling that she will do it. And I wouldn't mind if she did it. And silly me told all the boys that, so of course, we get to this party. I'm absolutely, I'm off my feet, can't walk. Because there's all this pressure. I'm just trying to drink the pressure away and trying to calm down and just be able to enjoy myself and just sort of talk to this person normally. autism. I was making eye contact back then either, and it was really hard going socially. So I was drinking more to try and compensate for that. So we get to this party and there she is. She's over there. She's in the corner. I remember I walked in and she was in the corner. I was like, holy dooly, that's her. And the boys, one of my mates elbows me. He's like, you're on tonight, mate. You're on. I was like, yeah, righto. As I'm about to vomit. Very attractive. So the party's going, right, and look, I'm putting AC/DC on the music. I'm doing my best air guitar impressions, of Highway to Hell and stuff, and thinking that I was looking pretty cool in front of this girl because she was in the same room. We were all floating around, but she was sort of hanging around because she'd heard rumours that Elliot was maybe going to try and have a talk with her and say g'day. So, I'm trying to be as loud and as obnoxious as I can be. I'm on a highway to hell, and I'm sort of, looking at it out of my, so lame, out of my periphery and trying to really show off, and be like, look at me, I'm standing out from the rest of the crowd because I'm cool, come with me, I'll kiss ya. Yeah, it'll be cool. Trust me, So anyway, so I'm acting like a clown, which I used to do a lot at this point. I was very much in clown mode because I thought that was cool. So that's what I used to do. I used to do it at school. Like I said, I was sitting out class and stuff. This was still happening. And I would turn that up to, I'd dial it up to 11 on the drink, trying to impress the girl at this party. So anyway, so I'm going around, high-fiving the boys, making sure she can see that, the boys love me and all this sort of stuff. But I wasn't actually making any moves on her. And I knew this, and although I was acting more confident and all that sort of stuff, there was no way in hell I was feeling anything but being petrified, and I was. I remember saying to one of my mates, I was like, look, I don't know what to do. What do I do, man? I can't talk to her. It's too hard. I don't know. There's too many people around looking. And he said to me, it's all right. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll pull her aside. I'll have a word with her. Just let her know that, that you're interested. We'll see what she says. If it's good news, obviously I'll let you know. If it's not as well, I'll let you know that too. So I'll let you know, give it a little bit. I'll get a one-on-one. I'll have a chat with her and I'll report back to you. I was like, righto, mate. Thanks, mate. Appreciate it. Good luck. And remember, say that I'm really cool, and how much you think I'm a good bloke, all right? Make sure you say that. Anyway, we go to school together. She sees me every day. But anyway, even at this point, I'm like, look, build me up, man. You got to build me up to be something that I'm not because, I don't know, I don't think I'm up to it. So anyway, so I'm, going around the party. I'm fixated on her, looking at her out of my periphery and just glancing over every now and then. And then I see me mate, not grab her, but, say to her, all right. And they went out the front and then they had a chat. And I was like, holy dooly, this is it, Elliot. I remember I sat down with a cup of goon, of red wine. I used to drink the red wine, not the white, because it was 1% stronger for the same price. God, such a degenerate. But I was sitting there thinking, oh man, this is it. This is life defining. I don't know if I thought about it in those words, but that's what it felt like. And I remember sitting there sculling that red wine, almost vomiting it back up because I've already passed out like twice at this point. So I'm well on my way. And thinking, right, this is it. You got to do it, man. You got to do it tonight. Everyone's expecting it. Everyone knows. Come on, please, God, help me do this tonight. So anyway, so my friend walks back in and I'm petrified, but, and I can see she's coming a little bit, further behind, so I've got to put the act on again. And I say, don't talk to me just yet, mate. Don't talk to me just yet. Just act normal, but come get me in a minute. Then let me know, how it goes. Because, I didn't want to seem desperate or anything. I wasn't desperate. No way. No way was I desperate to get my first hookup that was life-defining. So anyway, eventually he comes up to me. He's like, right, this is the deal. She doesn't want to date. This is funny. And this will, for people that were at school at this time, you'll know exactly who I'm talking about and the dynamic that I'm talking about here. But this individual said to my friend, she said, look, I don't want to date him. I don't want to go out with him and be his girlfriend because he loves the Newcastle Knights. Remember my number one rugby league football team that I'm obsessed with and I still am proudly. He loves the Newcastle Knights and I hate the footy and I hate the Knights and it just wouldn't work. But if he was to come over and say hello, I would kiss him, but it would have to be away from everybody. I don't want to kiss him in front of everybody. So that was, so overall, it's like, all right, even at this point, with my whole, I guess, outlook on romance and stuff developing, I was still I wasn't a hookup guy, and I'm not a hookup guy. I'm a relationship sort of guy. I want to get real deep with people emotionally, not in maybe another way. You know what I mean? You get my drift? And even back then, that was the same. So that was a bit of a disappointment that she didn't see things progressing, much further beyond this kiss. But at the same time, I was like, you know what? I don't care. She's good looking. I just got to kiss someone. She seems keen. That's enough for me. All right, Elliot, this is it. Do it. Bloody do it. So the party's about half over at this point, and I go up in front of everybody and I say, hi, so-and-so, it's Elliot, because obviously she knows who I am, but whatever. And then, I can't remember the exact conversation. I remember I wasn't making much eye contact, which, as we know, I was autistic and I still am, so I now know, didn't know at that point. Lots of social anxiety, I was sweating a lot. I remember sweating a lot. But I remember thinking also, see, so much overthinking. I had a dark shirt on and it was all right. But I remember being sort of embarrassed because I was like, I was sweating because I was under the pump. And I remember I was just trying to talk about things that I thought she was interested in. And I don't know what it was. And I didn't even know what it was back then either. But I was too wrapped up in my own head. And I kept sort of literally and figuratively tripping over myself. So what would happen was, I'd talk to her and then we'd walk sort of downstairs to get a drink. And then, there was an opportunity to slip out the side and do the deed. But no, I couldn't handle it. All right, let's walk upstairs, even though that's where everyone is. But, we'll just walk and talk and that's all good. So anyway, up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. And finally I get the gumption, if you like, to say, how about we go out the front for a little bit? And she's like, yeah, sure, no worries, because that's what you do. I was told that's what you do. You tell them, let's go out the front away from everybody. And if it's just you two and she's keen, I guess back then that was consent back in those days or whatever it meant as a 16-year-old. Not complete consent, of course, but that meant you're on the right track. So I was like, all right, we're out the front. This is good. We're on the right track. Okay, that's like part 2 done. The first part was to talk to her full stop. The second part was let's go outside together away from everybody. But again, I was super nervous. So I just kept talking and talking, a bit like I'm doing now, and talking and talking. And this is what I do on dates even today. If I'm in that sort of, I'm much better at it now. But, if I'm in that real anxious sort of self-conscious sort of mood, like I can't handle any pauses because that's too awkward and it reflects poorly on me. It has to in some way. So I will fill the conversation up. So I just kept talking and talking. And I remember I was standing there and she was pacing in front of me up and down this street, up and down, up and down. Not too far away. Like we were still conversing the whole time. But I remember thinking it was interesting that she was going up and down, up and down, up and down. And I sort of brought that up. I remember this part. I was like, oh, you're doing sort of the pacing thing. What's that about? This is the young Elliot psychology enthusiast, picking up on a bit of behaviour here that might represent something more. And I was like, yeah. So what's the go with the pacing? And she's like, oh, when I'm sort of got to think about things and I'm sort of thinking about things and wanting to figure stuff out. Like I tend to pace a bit. I was like, oh yeah, that sounds plausible. I guess that's what people do. I was like, oh, she must be thinking about something. I wonder what that means. Didn't click that it was me. I was the one she was thinking about because she's wondering, when is this guy going to make a move? Will he stop talking and plant one on my lips? Come on, that's what we're out here for. It's already been set up. His friend knows. He would have passed this on to her. I don't know if this is what she was thinking, but this is what I'm thinking in the moment. So there's this pressure, this expectation. I'm crumpling. I couldn't handle it. So anyway, this went on for like an hour and a half. And remember I said about getting picked up at like midnight, kept checking me watch at previous parties and thinking, holy dooly, I'm running out of time. I've got to make me move now or else I'll miss out. Oh, my mum's here. Oh, I missed out again. Well, I'm going to ruminate about that every day now until the next opportunity. Well, this was happening again. It was nearing midnight and I knew that she was getting picked up at midnight. I knew this. I was told this. I was given the heads up. Elliot, make your move before midnight or else you're going to miss out. She's keen as she can be, to kiss someone. I don't know. All the signs were supposedly there. I knew this and that just put more pressure on, more and more pressure. and people would walk. I'm so sorry if this story is boring, but as I said, look, I've got to get this out. I haven't spoken about this like in public like this before, like in this sort of depth before. It's sort of cool, going back in time. So anyway, you're all probably wondering what on earth happens. So she's doing the pacing thing. Every now and then, drunk friends and people I didn't know, because there were randos at the party too. It was pretty cool. Would walk out like, hey, how you going, Elliot? And I'd be like, oh, God, so embarrassing. Yeah, I'm fine. Anyway, it's like 10 to 12. And she's like, all right, I need to go back inside because I need to get my stuff because I'm going to go soon. And straight away, my heart sank. And it was even now over the years of the waves of negative emotion that I talk about, let me tell you, that was a big one. That floored me. I was like, you have done it again. You are, I was thinking this clear as day, you are pathetic. You are weak. You're as frigid as they say. And there's something wrong with you because you just cannot do this. There is something wrong. You're defective. You should feel bad, Elliot, because you've boobed it up again. And this is how it's always going to be. This was the perfect opportunity. You still couldn't do it. What an embarrassment. Hang your head in shame. I'm talking, it was that serious, it was. And I was believing every word that my inner critic was saying. Back then, my inner critic maybe wasn't as analytical as it is now, but it was just as destructive. And those words cut just as deep as they do today, if not more, because I didn't know what the inner critic was at this point, but man, it used to just slam me at every chance that it got. And this was the peak of opportunities to slam me, because this was the perfect opportunity and you still stuffed it up, Elliot. That is so embarrassing. You're a disgrace. And that's what I was thinking. I was like, oh man. So I followed her in, and I was going slow. I was like kicking her up, going like, I can't believe this. You are pathetic. And go inside. And I had this other thought too at the same time, which was, mate, you got to do this now. You got to do it now. It's now or never. Just trust me. I don't know where this voice was coming from. And it was just like, Elliot, do it. For God's sakes, do it. So anyway, she grabs a bag and we walk out, not to the front, out to the side that led to the front, but just to the doorway. So the whole party, I don't know if you can imagine, is in this doorway. And everyone's sort of looking around because, again, what's Elliot doing with the girl? Is he going to finally do it? For some unknown reason, everyone had invested interest in me kissing people. Everyone was watching. And I knew they were watching. And that, in that moment, actually helped because that added to this, you've got to do it now. The weight of expectation was so heavy at that point. The social anxiety was so strong that it actually turned into a bit of a motivator and pushed me into action. So we say goodbye. I say goodbye. I'm standing in front of her. She's standing in front of me. We're in the doorway. The whole party's watching. Music's pumping. But, everyone's sort of checking out what's going on. And she turns around to go and I said, I was about to say a name then. Whoops. So-and-so, just one thing before you go. And I grabbed her by the hand and I remember feeling like, I did. I felt like electricity, I was like, oh, here we go. Her hand feels nice. And then she turned around. I was like, oh yeah, what is it? And then I planted it. I did it with my eyes open. I was kissing her. And my eyes were open the whole time. And I remember thinking, I should close my eyes. That's what she's doing. I didn't know what to do. She had her eyes closed, so I guess I probably should too. And it was in front of everybody. Now, forget about me being embarrassed. She specifically said, I will kiss Elliot, but please, I do not want it to be in front of everybody because that's just embarrassing, which, as a 16-year-old, it was embarrassing. I didn't actually take that as being embarrassing because of me. I knew what she was on about. It is, we all wanted to kiss people, but we didn't really want other people looking, and she certainly didn't, and I certainly didn't. But in true typical Elliot style, I fumbled and bumbled and tripped my way pretty much into her lips. It sounds a bit gross, but for the greatest 5-second kiss of my life, I didn't know what I was doing. Eyes were open. I could see this is how aware I was in that moment because the adrenaline was so strong. I was locked in. I knew what was going on. I knew on one hand, it was a bit weird that I had my eyes open. I should probably close them soon. But I also could see out my peripheral to the right-hand side of us through that doorway. I could hear it and I could see it. People started high-fiving and cheering. So I quickly closed the eyes and then pulled back, and she said, "It's been a great night, Elliot. I'll talk to you soon. I'll see you when we're at school. I hope you have a good rest of your night," which was so sweet and lovely, considering I was just threw her into this unbelievably embarrassing situation. But people were clapping, people were cheering, they were high-fiving each other, and they were running at me. And as she turns to go, her mum, I can even see up the garden path out to the front where she was pacing for so long that night. I could see that her mum was there and the door was open, "Oh, so-and-so, come on." Still to this day, I don't know if her mum saw it, but anyway, kids will be kids, eh? You know what I mean? Hey, pretty good. Anyway, so she quickly rushes off because she's got to go because the mum's there and you got to go. And there's this wave of people that are starting to descend on the spot where I'm stood, where I kissed the girl finally for the first time. And all of a sudden, everyone's hugging me, cheering, we're high-fiving. Everyone's like, "Hey, Elliot, you did it. You finally did it. How good's this?" Everyone's cheering. It was the most embarrassing moment. Seriously, my inner critic was like, "See, embarrassing. The fact that they're responding like this, that is not something to be proud of." And I wasn't. I was not enjoying this at all. The attention, the fact that this was such a big deal that finally Elliot had kissed somebody. So that just reaffirmed that even though I'd now sort of got the monkey off the back, it didn't actually change anything because the reaction by everybody told me that this was significant. And the significance was that Elliot is defective and yet somehow has been able to pull this off. That's how I interpreted it. Knowing what happened now, people that I've spoke to since then, whenever this has been brought up, there was actually nothing but it was all, "This is great, this is really good, we're actually really happy for him." But that is not how I interpreted this at all. I interpreted this through my forming BPD lens that distorts everything and turns it into a negative against the self. And this is where the BPD, the traits were already there. The traits had been there for a fair while. There'd been emotional dysregulation. I had massive self-esteem issues. There was impulse control problems. There was really being really tight friends with people and then sort of pushing them away and then going on to other people and being a bit finicky like that with my relationships before relationships with girls. It was there, the makings of my borderline personality were there, and they just needed the trigger, and then the disorder would explode from that moment on. And I'll tell you right now, that kiss changed my life forever. It's such a pivotal moment, and that is when my BPD started right there. The wheel started turning, and it was on. And all the problems I've had since, from that moment, me kissing the girl in front of everybody with my eyes open, which was specifically what she didn't want to happen, and everybody having such an interest in it and creating this big deal out of me finally kissing somebody because it obviously meant that there was something wrong with me, that was the perfect fertile ground for my borderline personality disorder to start to manifest itself. And it does. That is the time, the sort of later teens, is when BPD tends to really take hold. And a lot of it is because, not everybody's like this, but for me, a lot of people are, say, predisposed to borderline personality, but you still need the environment to pull the trigger on things, flick that switch. And there was a chance that if I maybe got away with this and everyone stopped bugging me, if everyone wasn't talking about me kissing people all the time, constantly making such a big deal, I still think there was a chance that potentially a lot of my borderline personality could have been avoided. But unfortunately, everyone was clapping, everyone's cheering. Then it got worse. Then they put me, first off, they all ran out and tackled me, crash tackled me, and everyone was like, "Stacks on, stacks on." So I'm on the bottom, and everyone's like, and everyone, all the boys are jumping on, and they're being stupid. And then finally they let me up, everyone crawls off, and we're pushing each other. And then someone puts me on their shoulders, and I'm being paraded around this party as I see my new friend drive off, in her car with her mother. I can see them driving off out the front as I'm being paraded around this side sort of way and then out in the backyard, and everyone's sort of congregated out there. And it was the most embarrassing thing in the world. And everyone's like, hey, he finally did it. Elliot did it. Yeah, finally did it, mate. How good's that? How do you feel, Elliot? How do you feel? And I was like, oh, yeah, I feel great. Yeah. What a great moment. I still don't understand why this is so important to everybody else, but yeah, this is definitely important to me, but I didn't realize at that point how pivotal it was going to be. So everyone's parading me around and all that, and then they shut me off, and, the party sort of goes back, but people are still coming up to me, slap me on the back, hey, you did it, mate, you're going to try and kiss her again and all this stuff. I'm like, hang on, I've just finally, ticked this box, and now you're telling me already I need to be going in for round 2, so to speak. And then a bit later on, it got into more, okay, now you've kissed somebody, but now you got to sort of do it again and again so it's comfortable, and so you've really done it. But then you got to start doing more stuff. You got to cover more bases. That analogy, first base, second base, doing different sexual things. Well, anyway, all of a sudden, I don't know what I was then. I think that's first base, but now I had to go to second base because everyone was already at third base already. Well, that was the impression I had, that everybody was already at third base. I'd finally got to first base. Finally, I'm in the game, but I had a lot of catch up to do. And already I couldn't even enjoy that moment I couldn't enjoy it at all because everyone rushed me and were like, although they were sort of being nice, they were still ripping me off, and that's how I took it anyway, which I guess is the main thing. But I was so embarrassed. All my insecurities were just massively on show. It was just the fact that her and I were just walking around in circles up and down for so long, and I couldn't make eye contact, and I couldn't string a sentence together, and then I couldn't make a move. I had no confidence. It was just, that poor, autistic, soon-to-be BPD riddled boy. And that's what I was. I was a boy, and that moment didn't turn me into a man. But it certainly dictated terms for the next couple of years and still to today. So she drives off. I'm getting paraded around. Finally, it's over. Everyone's now saying, okay, you've done that, but now you got to do this, this, and this because everyone else has done that already, Yeah, you're in the game. That's great. But, get with it, will you? Catch up. And then all of a sudden the pressure was back again. And then the pressure was on, could I do this again? Or is this the only time I'll ever get to kiss a girl? Because I wasn't comfortable. I didn't feel any more comfortable after doing it. That was natural. I should be okay. Definitely not. It felt very unnatural to me. And it was because, again, autistic, social anxiety disorder, that's not a natural thing for me to do, to pick up girls and kiss them, especially when I was 16. But that's what I had to do. I had to find a way somehow to get to the point where that was second nature to me, because that is what defines you as a person. The amount of people you've kissed, which then turn into the amount of people you've done more than kissing with, and then turn into the amount of people you've had sex with. Every time the goals would be moved further down the road, and I'm trying to catch up, on these numbers. Because after this is when things really turned bad as far as my constant ruminations are concerned, because it wasn't about anymore the fact I hadn't kissed anybody, but now it was about the fact that I'd only kissed one person, and I didn't know if I would ever be able to kiss another person again. But that's for another day. That is the next part of the story, when the 16-year-old loose cannon and my borderline personality was born. But that's the story of the first kiss. So there was a lot of lead up, a lot of just constant, obsessive cognitions just running me down every day leading up to this. And at so many parties before that blocked so many potential chances. And then when it did finally happen, it got worse because it was made into an even bigger deal, which actually was not what I wanted at all. And now the stakes were higher and I was playing a new game. And if I wasn't comfortable playing the kissing game, let me tell you, 16-year-old me was not comfortable progressing to the next level, so to speak. So all of a sudden, that sort of pattern of feeling like a failure, insecurity, all that stuff, it just kept going and going and going. And then unfortunately, after this point, a lot of people at school started doing a lot of comparisons and saying a lot of things that entrenched this way of thinking. And then there was no choice. Borderline was going to take hold. It had to. My environment was dictating it, and my psyche at that point was malleable enough that it was being taken advantage of. And again, before I finish this episode soon, I will wrap it up, I promise. Now, see, there we go. I've forgotten what I was going to say again. What was I going to say? Oh, it was a good one. Oh, yeah. Again, the people that were saying things before and then from moving on from this point, again, some of them are friends, and I reckon you might not realise it, but some of yous, it's actually you, all right? Some of you listening, it might actually be you. But again, let me say, there's no hard feelings because we were young and stupid. It's fine. But it's true, and it is, and that's why I really cut deep, because it was some of the people that were real close that were saying things like, doing the comparisons where I was obviously losing and really drilling it home again that I was different and defective. And unfortunately, I thought finally kissing a girl would fix everything. It would shut everyone up. It would shut up my inner critic and those obsessive negative cognitions that I kept swirling round and round, and my insecurities would drift away and my self-esteem would be boosted. No, it just made things worse. This just accelerated the process. And from this point on, there was no way I was getting off the BPD train. And, if you're listening still to the end of this episode, I congratulate you for listening to over an hour of me talking about my first kiss. You're the troopers. Let me tell you, I love you all. But yeah, this unfortunately, this story, it continues along this way, but it just gets more and more entrenched. And here I am today as a 34-year-old who still grapples with these, as I call them, my high school issues. I tell the kids when I present at the high schools, I'm like, when I was at school, I tell them a briefer version of that story. But, and everyone sort of laughs and it's funny, but you can see in some of their eyes, it's like, yeah, you guys are like me. I got you. Don't worry. I went through it too. And it's a great feeling being able to open up that insight to some kids that maybe really need to hear it. Because I needed to hear it back then, but there were no black dog stories, institute people coming to school when I was at high school. So all I did was just try and bounce off the external feedback I was getting from my external environment. And it was telling me that I was different and things were not going as they should be if I was to be cool and accepted. So I just, me being me, just ruminated on that, just focused on it, fixated on it, and it became a huge problem that is still a problem today. And here at 34, there's still times where I get on the drink, because I remember I gave up for a little bit, but I'm back on it again. A lot of the reasons why I'm back on it is being driven by this 16-year-old self who is still hurting real bad. This poor bastard, he is hurting, real bad. And all this 16-year-old self is trying to do is to protect me, the current 34-year-old me, and also my inner child. This all links back to inner child work, which again, I haven't really done that much in the potty either, and it's coming too, because that is so important. But this 16-year-old part that was never able to let go, and that's why I'm doing get trauma often. In that moment, it's hard to let go of like that age. You still think things that you did at that age, because there's a bit of you that is trapped there because you don't understand what went wrong. And that part of you is trapped trying to figure out what went wrong so it doesn't happen again. So there's this 16-year-old part of me that is trapped back there trying to get kisses at parties and failing, but thinking that drinking more and doing more drugs is the way to overcome it, and then drives a lot of my impulsive behavior that happens today because I haven't come up with the answers yet as to what happened when I was 16 and how some fairly innocuous comments, that wasn't the worst bullying in the world, but for me, it meant everything, and it was so crippling for my self-esteem, and it still is today. I'm still back there. There's that 16-year-old part that is trying to figure out what on earth should we have done that would have avoided everybody ripping me off in front of me and behind my back, and then later on too. It's trying to figure out, right, I don't want Elliot, the 34-year-old, or Elliot, the inner child. I don't want either of them to be hurting and to be ripped off by people anymore. So what I'm going to do is, this is a 16-year-old, remember, it's saying, Elliot, I'm going to drive you to engage in behaviors that make you cool and, put you up on the social hierarchy and, gets you out of that whole everyone ripping you off zone. So what does that mean? Me failing over the years trying to kiss girls and all that sort of stuff, boost my numbers, drinking more than everyone else because I thought that would mean I'm cool and no one could rip me off, doing more drugs and going harder than anybody else because, again, that meant that I was cool and I would be accepted and people would be like, instead of going, oh, yeah, Elliot, yeah, he's a bit of a loser, they'd be going, Elliot, yeah, man, mate, he goes hard, that bloke, he's brilliant, you know? And that's a terrible way of thinking, and it's such a teenage way of thinking because it is a teenage way of thinking. You know, the way I should be thinking is, you know, there's other things that are more fundamental that make you a good person, and being able to drink heaps and take drugs and stuff is not the way to define yourself. But when you're a teenager and all your friends around you and the other teenagers, you know, seem to be using those two things as ways to define each other and measure each other up, because I've still got a part that hasn't figured out what the hell went wrong back then, it's still in that zone. It's still thinking, well, I guess now, you know, when we go back and have a look at the memories gone by, I guess it is drinking and drugs that we need to do. So let's do it now today as a 34-year-old, because then no one can ever say that I was uncool again and rip me off behind my back like happened when I was a 16-year-old and moving forward. So there you go. I'm going to finish it there. That's an hour and 15 minutes. I hope this comes out okay. Imagine if this doesn't, if you're listening to this, obviously, again, I've deemed it good enough to actually publish, but imagine if I have to delete this and do it again. I don't think I could do it. I should have used 2 microphones. Anyway, that is the story of me and my first kiss, and when my BPD flick, I was meant to be a big moment, when my BPD switch was flicked from off to right on. And it's been a real roller coaster ever since. Yeah, you know, I was, like I said, even at parties before, there was a bit of drinking going on, but I used to take milk to parties, you know, and everyone knew I was like a runner and used to train and all that sort of stuff. And I was pretty innocent. I was very innocent, very naive, and very vulnerable as well. And people liked that about me though. And that's why they wanted to help me kiss someone, because they thought that was important. So let's help Elliot do it because we like him. But unfortunately, my brain and my psyche and my internal parts at that point twisted that into a real negative and then just focused on it. And unfortunately, more and more fuel was added to the fire. And here we are today, still going to therapy as a 34-year-old, talking about people who have kissed more people than me and how that is some sort of measure of success. It is, and you know, and I say it out loud like I am now, and it's like, God damn it, Ellie, come on. You know, like logically, I know it doesn't make sense. And this is why, okay, I'm going to talk for a bit longer, but this is why cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, which is the gold standard therapy, psychological therapy for, you know, depression, anxiety, not as much BPD, but this is why it hasn't worked really for me, CBT, because I know logically now as a 34-year-old that stuff's rubbish and that doesn't mean anything. Who gives a? Like, no one cares anyway. And even if they do, that's more a reflection on them than it is on you. You know, and then there's another immature part of me that's like, yeah, Elliot, and we've been with a few chicks now, you know, we got our numbers up. And I hate it that I still think like that, but there is a part of me that thinks like that. And he's still obsessed with the numbers and still trying to sort of boost them up for me. I don't know where the threshold is. I don't know what I've got to reach before I can tick this all off. I don't know. But thankfully that party's becoming smaller and smaller and quieter because of all the therapy work I've done. But CBT doesn't cut it. You know, CBT is all about looking at some, not all, but generally speaking, very, very brief terms, is very much about looking at a negative cognition, evaluating the logic that underpins it. And 9 times out of 10, there is no logic and it's just your mind playing tricks on you. And then you can be like, oh, of course, I've thought about it properly. I'm thinking about this logically with my objective or wise mind, if we're talking DBT, the wise mind. And now I can evaluate that thought in the context of everything I know. And it's like, hey, that's a bit silly. I don't need to think that. Let's turf that way of thinking. And, you know, if this is in therapy, let's go to the next one. But it doesn't work for people who have really deep, ingrained, like personality disorders, for example, self-esteem issues, massive insecurities, because, you know, we know that the level of pain that we're feeling for, I don't know, me not feeling as jacked as some other guy, like I know that it's not logical that I should be feeling this much strong emotion. I know it's not right. You know, Like, I know that these are my high school issues, as I say to the kids when I present, or as I say here on the potty, or in therapy, I know that these are silly high school issues, and the comments made by people were silly comments that no one thought about. It was just, it was just kids being kids, teenagers trying to figure out what's going on, where we all stand. And I know that. And yet, still today, those same sort of comments that burned the holes right through my psyche, right through, and inflamed my amygdalas and brought this borderline personality on, at least partly. Unfortunately, that it holds so much weight and significance, even though I know that there's none that should be attributed to it at all, because it's a big joke. It's ridiculous. This is stuff that happened when you were 16. You're 34 now, Elliot, more than double my age back then. Come on, let's move on. But it's not that easy, and that's why this is mental illness. If I could just turn this off, then right, it's just some negative thoughts I need to just get rid of. But I can't turn this off. I've got OCD that obsesses on these things. My personality is a disorder. Like, come on, like this is, and then there's the autism, ADHD, whatever, the developmental stuff that's going on too, and the depression, bipolar, the generalized and social anxiety, whatever. Like, I've got all the labels in the world. But this is why it's a mental illness, because it doesn't matter how much I convince myself personally that this stuff doesn't matter and to move on. I can't do it. And I'm not in complete control of these thoughts. And often they will spiral out of control and I've got nothing I can do about it. And it happens a lot, even at work. When people come in, customers and stuff like tradies, I compare myself and they go, yeah, he's better looking than me. Yeah, he'd pull all the chicks, He'd be able to do what I can't do because he's cool. Seriously, I still think that rubbish today. And I know it's rubbish. I'm like, slap my hand. I'm like, come on, Elliot, stop doing that. But I can't help it because this is mental illness. I cannot help this. I would love to turn this off if I could. And I think the way to do it is through therapy and a lot of work that I am doing on myself outside of therapy as well. But I can't turn this off. I know it's silly, but it is, this way of thinking has pushed me in a hospital more than once, has pushed me to the brink of where I have had to make the decision, all right, we've got a choice here. Do we keep going with this thing called life or do we end it now? What's the story, Elliot? And thank God that at the end of those sorts of conversations with the self, I've thought, no, there's some flicker of hope there somewhere that I'm going to latch onto. It's the smallest little thing, but it's enough. We're going to keep going. Let's keep pushing. But, this is serious. I can't express this enough. It might sound silly, some of these thoughts, and they are silly on the face of things. But to me, and the way I think and my psychological makeup, like this is life and death stuff. And it's almost killed me more than once. Can you believe that, Like seriously, the number of people that you kissed when you were 16, that has driven suicidal ideation and tendencies for me. It's crazy, isn't it? Crazy. I shouldn't say the word crazy. It's not crazy, but it is a great example of how insidious and how deep ingrained mental illnesses, pick any of them, it doesn't matter if it's strong enough. They just get in there. They change your whole perception of the self. It distorts the way you view the world. Mate, mental illness sucks. And I hope that this episode may have provided a bit of entertainment along the way. And I do hope that, so in a way, people are sort of thinking, you guys thinking like, well, come on, it wasn't that bad. What's he talking about? Well, kissing, who cares about kissing? Because that's the whole point, It wasn't in a lot of ways that bad, but it has almost pushed me to the end more than once. And that's with me knowing that it probably doesn't deserve that level of significance. That is mental illness. That is mental illness. You don't just turn that frown upside down and put a smile on your face. This stuff is serious and it kills people. And it almost did me in more than once. But thankfully it didn't. And I'm here to tell the story with you today. The next part of the story, so that's the first kiss. And then the next part is, which I'll do in another episode. Get ready for it. I know you're going to love it. Which will probably be the episode on retroactive jealousy, which that is probably going to be the episode. If you want to know about my outlook on life back then and how it affects me still today, that's the big one. That's the one that's ruined relationships. But anyway, but after this point, went back to school, and like I said, the stakes were even higher now. I had to do more to prove myself to people that I was cool. And it just was getting harder and harder to somehow try and, fib my way through. But that's coming. So if I thought I had sort of insecurities at this point, no. Well, I did, but they're about to be ripped open and just constantly jammed, bang, bang, bang. And then my borderline personality takes hold. And then this pattern that has repeated itself and ruined all of my relationships has also now started to manifest itself. Because not long after this, I actually had my first girlfriend, which hint, might have been the same person. And then all of a sudden, this pattern that has been enduring, that has happened in every single relationship, which I haven't gone into too much detail in the potty, but I'm going to now. It's time. It is time, because this is the stuff that really, almost ended everything for me and has ruined so many good opportunities, and even today causes so much pain and guilt and shame. Oh, it's all coming, everybody. You thought I was open and honest before. Let me tell you, this is the real stuff. This is the real stuff. This is what gets me, burn up inside. Like I'm firing up inside while I'm telling this story. And that part of me that's, the 16-year-old within that's remembering with me, because we're on this journey together, me and him are together, and he's saying, man, that was messed up, mate. That was bad. I still feel it. And I'm like, yeah, I feel it too. It was, but look, we've got to move on. He's like, I don't know if we can. And that's why I'm still stuck in the past. But I need to come up with a way where me and these parts from the different ages and different experiences can walk together as one, as the self in today's world. And I'm not always living in the past, which is what I do. And I still ruminate about this stuff a lot. Not so much the first kiss, but what's coming next, big time. Because not only has it hugely affected me and me personally, unfortunately, and I said this in the BPD episode I've done. If you haven't listened to it, I highly recommend it. Maybe it would be a good thing to listen to before the retroactive jealousy episode, actually. That will fill in gaps as well. But BPD is renowned, and it's one of the worst for this, where it affects the people around the individual who's got it so badly. So when I would go down, crash and burn in flames, I have burnt a lot of people, and I have to carry that guilt and shame around with me. And I've burnt them in ways which are directly connected to my thoughts about kissing people and how I was late to do it and how everyone was ripping me off and making a big deal out of it. It's all linked. And unfortunately, because I didn't realize what was going on, I didn't have the insight. It took until I was 27 to finally get my BPD diagnosis, which is the big one for this sort of part of the story. BPD is the big one, and OCD as well, as its sort of helping hand. But it took for me to be 27, like 4 ruined relationships, other innocent parties being burnt by me, and when I was crashing down and taking people with me, which isn't what I wanted to do, but unfortunately that's what happened because it's a mental illness. Get to choose these things. There's a bit coming. So I do recommend, if you want to listen to more of my voice and my ramblings, I've rambled in this one, but look, I don't even care because I knew I was going to get excited doing this episode because this is pretty, I don't know, this is sort of cutting pretty deep. So this is as raw as it gets. There's no drafts. I've got nothing written down. This is just talking from the heart. But yes, the BPD episode will fill in some other blanks as well, and it'll all start to make sense because this pattern started developing. My borderline personality started taking hold, and then people started to get burnt by it. And I still hold a lot of guilt about that today. But we'll get into that soon, which is so exciting. So I hope you enjoyed that episode. It is a bit negative. It is. It's quite depressing, This poor little kid that I was, naive, innocent. I was just trying to do my best. I didn't know what I was doing in the social world because I was autistic. I didn't know what was going on, but I was just trying to mimic other people and try and, do what I think is cool so I'm accepted, and, the fact that I'm different might go unnoticed. That's a terrible, that's such a sad thought, And I look back at myself then and I just feel so much sadness. It's like, man, that kid was trying hard. He was doing everything. He was battling all these mental illnesses that were popping up. I didn't even know what mental illness was. No one spoke about it back then, and life is just throwing bombs at me left, right, and center. I've got no clue what's going on. and I'm just trying to do the best that I can. And man, I tried hard, and I'll give myself credit, like resilient, tough, and I still bloody am today too. But man, yeah, it's sad. It's sad. I don't want anyone to go through that sort of stuff. And that's why I sort of do a lot of the stuff that I do with Black Dog or Every Mind or the mental health of this podcast as well, because I want people to be, I guess, educated on this sort of stuff and then identify potentially in themselves or in the people that they care about, and then feel empowered enough and skilled enough and with enough knowledge to know what to do to try and fix those things. Because back then, I had no idea what was going on. No one around me knew what was going on in their worlds or mine, and that caused huge problems. I'm still trying to, I'm trying to unravel here today at 34, and that was back when I was 16. Long time ago now. That was 18 years ago. Wow. And then you just ask some of my friends and stuff, my family in particular. There is a lot of me that is still that 16-year-old, let me tell you. Anyway, all right, that's enough for now. That's enough. That's a huge one. If you've listened to the end, thank you so much. I hope you've gained something from this. I got a feeling that I would not be the only person who has gone through this. And to be honest, the people that were putting me down were probably doing it because they were getting put down by other people. And, so everyone's putting each other down. Unfortunately, I didn't. Well, no, it's not because I didn't want to do this, but I didn't have anyone to put down. I was I was at the end, so I copped it all, I guess. But yeah, I think this, like the idea of insecurities and, the distorted view, negative view of the world and the self and self-esteem, we all have that to varying degrees. And I think this story will resonate with a lot of people. And I do hope that you guys have been able to figure out what's going on with that and been able to straighten it out, or at least made improvements that, life's pretty good, because it was pretty hard for me. First thing I'd do when I wake up was think about it. Last thing I'd be thinking when I went to bed is the same thing. And it was just brutal. It was brutal, man. Brutal. But it was going to get more brutal. I thought it was pretty potent, this negativity at this point. It was about to get a shot of steroids and go to the next level. But anyway, that's coming up a little bit further down the track. The episode on retroactive jealousy. That one's going to resonate with a lot of people for sure. It's going to be huge. But in the meantime, like I said, this is very much centered around borderline personality disorder in a lot of ways. So if you want to listen to my episode, which supposedly is pretty good, I don't know, I've had some good feedback on it. The borderline, if you just search, I don't know, wherever you are, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever, borderline personality brackets BPD in this podcast. That's the episode. That's what it's called. It might be quite insightful as well, and maybe it'll fill a few gaps in maybe your knowledge and maybe you'll notice things in yourself or other people, and I don't know, maybe be empowered moving forward. Anyway, that's enough. That's gone for so long that the 3 beers I had to really get loosened up, like I'm stone cold sober again. But I'm happy that's out there. I've been doing this podcast for 2.5, 3 years now. And for long listeners who have listened to every episode, and I love you all, I do, and thank you for being on that journey with me. And I know that you're there backing me and supporting me, and trust me, I draw upon that a lot. You have no idea. But you would have noticed that most of the stories I tell, or the reflections, are about things that happen sort of today or yesterday or a month ago or 6 months ago or maybe even like 2 years ago. But I haven't really gone back to the teenage years. And I'm going to have to go back further to when I was even younger than that too, because there's stories there too that I want to tell. But this is a big step for me to be able to put this out there. And, me at 16 would never, ever have believed that I would have the guts to be this bloody vulnerable. No way in hell. And I think this is a sign of the improvements and the progress that has been made. I'm going to give myself a pat on the back, because although this is one of the most long-winded episodes I've ever, this would be the most long-winded surely, I'm pretty proud of it. I am. There's a lot of heart in this. There's a lot of heart. There's a lot of pain as well. Definitely there's a lot of learnings, and a lot of memories that they're there and they still do their thing here today. But, yeah, I want to share this with you guys because I want to share everything, because I don't want people going through this rubbish. And maybe a little bit of this story resonates with you, and, maybe you're thinking, it wasn't just me that sort of felt that pressure. Elliot did too, That's a win, I reckon. So, but anyway, that's all for now. Thank you for listening. I appreciate it. If you somehow are still listening and you would like to support the show, feel free to like, subscribe on whatever platform you're using. Please give me a 5-star rating, because my whole definition of me as a person now is all about my ratings. 4.9%, almost got 100 ratings. That's pretty cool. So if you haven't rated the show yet and you'd like to, that would be amazing. That would be a great hit of dopamine for me. And you can follow me on Instagram at elliot.t.waters. I'll do my best to reply. Lately's been a bit difficult because I've had a few tough days, which the previous episodes have touched on. I've been very anxious, and I've had a few people reach out that are, just want to use me as a sounding board and stuff, which is great. I totally encourage it. But as part of me having boundaries nowadays, I need to know when to pull back. And unfortunately, this week has been difficult. But I think doing this episode is now going to free me up to have some good chats with people and see what's going on. So please feel free to reach out to me on Instagram at elliot.t.waters. And until next time, there's some great episodes coming. There's some interviews coming soon, which is awesome too. But as I said, if you want to know more about this sort of stuff, the BPD episode I've done, I think does a pretty good job of it, I would say. And the episode coming up, it might not be the next episode, but it's coming. My greatest challenge, retroactive jealousy, it is coming, and it is podcast defining, and I'm so excited for it. I'm so excited to let you in on my silly, silly thoughts. All right, thank you, everybody. Have a good one. I'll see you next time here on the Dysregulated Podcast.